Now we're going to work on the section where the player is going to be able to attack the enemy and kill the enemy. So in the resources for this section you will notice that I've given you a Unity package called Player Attack. So let's open that and we're just going to import this. It's going to go into the Horror Fuse Characters folder. Great, there it is. So Horror Fuse Characters, you will notice that you've got a new folder called Sounds. Got a couple of interesting sounds in there that we're going to use later. And in the animations, under the With Axe, Gun and Bat, we now have an enemy hurt and an enemy death animation, and the same thing for with gun. So enemy hurt gun, enemy death gun. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working on in this section. So first of all, with our enemy 4 selected, I just want to click on the body. And we need an area where we can actually trigger a response in the enemy. So somewhere where we can attack and hit, that's going to detect when the player has actually hit the enemy. So we're going to do this on body. So we're just going to right click, 3D object and cube. Okay, we're going to drag this one up and maybe make it a little bit smaller and taller. Okay, so we don't need the mesh renderer, we can remove that component. I'm going to click switch on my gizmo so that I can see the box collider there, and I do need to make this a trigger. Okay, so whenever the player hits this particular box, it's gonna the enemy is going to recognize that he's actually being hit, and it's going to take health off the enemy. So I'm going to change the name of this from cube to let me call it enemy hit point. Enemy hit point. Okay, just so that I know what it is. It's not necessary to name it that. You can name it anything you like. Okay, you may need to adjust this and try out different sizes because if it's too big, it might be too easy to kill the enemy. If it's too small, you might not be actually making contact, so you might not even be damaging the enemy. So you will need to experiment with this just to get it to the right size for it to be effective combat. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go to enemy 4 and to the animator. So we can see that we've already got our animations. Now we're just going to be working on the bat attack at the moment, and then obviously replicating this for the knife and the axe attack. So in the Horror Fuse Characters folder and animations, it's obviously a melee animation, so it's with axe, gun and bat. First of all, we're going to bring in this enemy hurt animation. And then bring in the enemy death. Okay, so they're very much going to link into each other, the enemy hurt and then enemy death. Okay, so we need another couple of parameters. So I'm going to create a trigger this time, and I'm going to call this trigger react. Okay, so a trigger is different to a boolean in that it has a little radio button. When this is triggered, it will play the animation once and then return. Okay, whereas obviously with a boolean, you switch it on, it continues to play the animation endlessly until it's switched back off again. So that's exactly what we want with enemy hurt. Okay, we don't want it to stay in the hurt state. And then we need one for the death. So we're going to create a new bool and we'll simply call this one die. And obviously once this is activated and the character is dead, it will just stay in that animation state. Okay, so from enemy bat attack then, we're going to right click and make a transition to enemy hurt. We're going to click on this transition, we're going to say it doesn't have an exit time, but we are going to go down to react. And you'll notice there's no parameters for the conditions. Okay, so we don't need to select anything there. It just simply triggers it. And then we have to make sure that it goes back to enemy bat attack. This one should have an exit time and no conditions. So it plays the animation and instantly goes back. Okay, so from enemy hurt, we're going to right click and make a transition to enemy death. We're going to uncheck as exit time. In fact, no, I'm going to leave it as exit time checked. That way it has to play the full enemy hurt animation before he actually dies. Okay, which I think is slightly more realistic. and then we're going to give it a condition, and we're going to say that die is true. Okay, there is not going to be any kind of transition back, because once he's dead, that's it. He stays in that animation state, and we're effectively going to switch everything off using script anyway. So that's a one-time only thing. But interesting enough, in order to kill the enemy, you do need to have hurt the enemy so much that you've taken all their life off them, and then you hit them again, plays the enemy hurt, and then transitions to the enemy death. So he doesn't just die for no reason, which is what would happen if you put the enemy death directly from any other state. Because as soon as his health goes down to 0, it would instantly play that animation. Okay, so we've set up the animations, and I think I'm going to do something on the player animations next, just to refine those.